Moving here, we've got a pretty short list on the hearing schedule today, and we are going to start with Delegate Charkoudian on House Bill 829. And I assume we've got Robert Gramlich. Is that okay? And okay, we've got Senator Chris West making a guest appearance. We will allow that. Okay, House Bill 829, and you take the time you need, Delegate Charkoudian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, for the record, Delegate Lorig Charkoudian asking for a favorable report on House Bill 829. I think that this committee, along with the Economic Matters Committee, heard quite a bit about transmission over the last several weeks. I know there were a number of bills, and there were a number of bills because transmission has sort of gotten to a new place in our conversation here in Maryland. And this is a result of, I think, the Window 3 projects from PJM, as well as Window 2, which is in one forthcoming. Two significant transmission lines planned through Maryland. One is the Exelon line that is going to respond to the closure of Brandon Shores, and the other is the Piedmont line, which has been considerably more controversial, responding to load growth, primarily in Virginia, but also to some extent serving parts of Frederick. So as these conversations have happened, I think a lot of conversation about, like, how do we get to this place and what are the processes, and conversations about PJM and what's their role, and FERC and what's their role, and what control do we have over these things in the state of Maryland. So I joined in conversations with many of my colleagues in looking at these questions, which I've looked at over the course of many years, and asking the questions about, first of all, when we build transmission in the state, what are the things that we can control and should be controlling within the context of the Public Service Commission, because so much of this is under the jurisdiction of FERC. And then secondly, if we are going to build in the state, how do we make sure that any investment that we are making, and by we are making, I mean we're requiring our ratepayers to make, how do we make sure that those investments are as efficient as possible? And so this is where we get into these conversations about alternatives. We get into conversations about grid enhancing technologies. We get into conversations about reconductoring. And there's a real fine line that we end up having to walk, because so much of this is under the jurisdiction of FERC. There's a fine line that we have to walk in terms of what is it that the Public Service Commission can and can't do, and how do we maximize what it is the Public Service Commission can and can't do in the CPCN process to make sure that we are getting the best deal possible for our ratepayers, and the fairest deal possible for our communities through which many of these transmission lines will go. And so what this bill does, I think probably if you've had some hearings so far on transmission, you've probably heard about grid enhancing technologies. There's pieces of software that can take transmission that already exists, and using something like dynamic line rating, a piece of software can get more out of that transmission line that already exists. There's things like reconductoring that can take the current right-of-way and put on new and more efficient wires onto that right-of-way, and potentially get 20% more out of a line that already exists. Using grid-enhancing technologies means that so looking at so what this bill does. So here's how this bill takes advantage of those things. First, it requires that all of our current transmission in the state be reviewed on a 5-year cycle to see, is there something we can add to our current transmission, either reconductoring or grid enhancing technologies, that would allow us to get more out of current transmission. And that process is a process that potentially avoids future transmission lines needing to be built. The second thing that this does is it says when a transmission line comes in front of the Public Service Commission for a CPCN process, it adds a number of things that need to be considered, that need to be included in the application for that CPCN. A lot of what it adds is the consideration of alternatives, either alternatives to building the transmission at all, alternatives to the route that was chosen, alternatives, and it also requires that if new transmission is getting built, the transmission developers show that they maximize the use of grid enhancing technologies in order to avoid possible future transmission. So in all the sort of different ways we're going about it, it's a little trickier than we might do this if we had full control. If we were FERC, we might write this bill differently. But this bill really, I think, very effectively, and in conversations with the Attorney General's office and with the Public Service Commission, it very effectively sort of walks the line of everything that is within our control in the state of Maryland to maximize the use of grid-enhancing technologies and other alternatives to new transmission, and to make sure new transmission is built as efficiently and effectively as possible, is sort of what we have in this bill. You'll see the Public Service Commission is favorable with amendments. There's one technical thing that we missed in the House, and so I'll get that to you before, hopefully you'll be voting on this. I'll get that to you before then. And then most other groups are favorable. We have Rob Gramlich here who will speak about he's a technical expert on some of the aspects of the bill, but I think before I do that, Senator West, because this was sort of an issue that he spent a lot of time on, also wanted the opportunity, if it's okay, to share his support. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My remarks are going to be very brief. You may recall I presented a bill very similar to this a couple of weeks ago, and I, at the end of my presentation, said I'd had an amendment prepared to conform my bill to Delegate Charkoudian's bill, and I'd be perfectly happy if you did that. And I still would be happy if you do that. I think her bill and my bill are so close that I'd be more than happy if you passed Delegate Charkoudian's bill. And if you get the chance, take my bill and conform it to her bill and pass mine too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Senator West. Sir, give us your name, and you'll have up to 2 minutes to support the bill favorable.
Okay, thank you. My name is Rob Gramlich. I'm president of a firm called Grid Strategies based in Bethesda in the Washington, D.C. area. We focus on transmission and power markets. I was senior economist at PJM 20 years ago, and I do some work in this region, but mostly nationally and internationally. Appreciate your interest of the committee, and Delegate Charkoudian's here on transmission. It's not surprising. Transmission is getting so much attention with grid growth and data centers and all of the economic development happening. Transmission is critical, and as we build new lines, I think it's important to really make sure we squeeze as much as possible out of the existing wires, and that's where this suite of technologies comes in. Advanced transmission technologies, which include grid-enhancing technologies, which are more the operational software type of improvements, as well as advanced conductors, high-performance conductors, which are new cables that can deliver a lot more, and that gives you the opportunity to take existing rights-of-way and put a new cable on it and deliver a lot more power over that right-of-way. I think everybody here appreciates the benefit of not having to get new rights-of-way, given the controversies and difficulties of new rights-of-way. So with that, and we have been working on these technologies for many years, could answer questions, but I think I'll probably just leave it at that. Everybody seems very busy, and I just would emphasize that this is an important improvement. This bill looks like it would help move the ball forward in advancing these technologies.
Okay, let's go Senator Gallion, then Senator Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Delegate. So I also had a similar bill, SB 483, and I wanted to see how close maybe some of the parts of that, I want to see if they're in this bill or possibly could be added. So one thing, as you talk about advanced transmission technologies, I was kind of looking at the list, and I might miss it, but I didn't see like undergrounding a transmission line. Is that precluded from this, or does that need to, are you just opposed to that technology, or?
So I don't think I'm opposed to it. Undergrounding transmission is so exceedingly expensive. That's why I didn't include it. It's not really done for the most part, or it's not done for any extended period length. So I appreciate that from a aesthetics, and when we're concerned about transmission going through a community, we'd rather sort of not see it and have it underground. But I think it's unrealistic, and so that's just the price, the cost. Right. And because a big piece of what the they allow for sort of minimizing the need for new transmission while also saving costs to ratepayers. I was trying to keep things in this bill that was going to not increase the cost to ratepayers, and so that's why I didn't include
I
it.
think maybe part of the reason that was in there was also because you're looking at like existing brownfields or right-of-ways, that maybe you could do that in that same area and wouldn't have to have new lines. But you know, that might be one possibility that was in there.
And
The other,
the concept of existing right-of-ways is definitely in here. Like, I appreciate that, and I think that's right, and those concepts are in here. The undergrounding is not.
okay, and one last question. Does this allow them to look into using lines of another company, like with some franchise stuff there to?
So the way this gets at that is because we say in this, and this is sort of in the, if you want to look for it, it's in the second part of the, it's in the last part of the bill, I think. Yeah, it's in section 7-207.4. It sort of requires that everyone who has transmission in the state right now has to do this report to the PSC every 5 years. That's essentially saying proactively, so not after PJM says we need transmission here and then we're running around trying to find a way to, you know, put it on a line that already exists. It's proactively saying, look at your transmission. Are there expected congestion costs? Are there upgrades we can do to the transmission that already exists so that we completely avoid the need for PJM to come in and say, let's run the line here? So, so yes, there's the part that you're describing, but I think this kind of goes above that in trying to be proactive to prevent PJM from getting to the place where they have to say, we need a new, not to say they're not going to have new lines. There's going to be new lines, but yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, Senator Brooks.
Hi, thanks, Chair. Thanks for the bill, Delegate. Yeah, quick question. Why do you think the utility companies would not utilize GETS, first of all? You know, seems like that's an ideal way of mitigating cost. And what would be the incentive to just go ahead and run new lines as opposed to trying to get more out of the existing transmission?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it comes down to incentives, right? So utility companies make money when they build things. And so they make money when they build poles and wires and capital costs. That's the investment, and that's what they earn the return on. And so their incentive is actually to build things, not to be more efficient. But they're regulated companies, and that's why it's our responsibility. That's why it's our responsibility to require the look at GETS, to require advanced transmission technologies, because it's our job to minimize costs on ratepayers. Especially things like dynamic line rating, which is a piece of software. So that's expensed, it's not capitalized. So a utility gets passed through cost recovery for that, but they don't get the 9% rate of return over time. So they would much rather build a new line, unless we're requiring them to, you know, do this. And so that's why sort of it's not inherently in their interest to get this right. And we have to get the policy right so that they get it right.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Yep.
And I would take it too that if they build those new transmission lines, they get to amortize that cost over a period of
30, 50 years,
30
yeah.
to 50 years.
That's exactly right.
So it's a much greater return on investment than it
Yeah.
is expensing it.
Yeah.
Just like normal for-profit entities would.
Correct. And that's why we have to get the policy right.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's exactly right.
Thanks, Chair.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, additional questions? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
House Bill 12,
829.
okay, I'm going to get it right. House Bill 829. That concludes the bill here on House Bill 829. Let's go to House Bill 1273. I know we've got Landon from MEA, and I think we've got, see some folks from the Maryland Clean Energy Center here in the House. Kathy Magruder. Kathy, welcome. Thank you. Okay, we're on, again, House Bill 1273. Landon, why don't you lead off? This is on behalf of the Maryland Energy Administration, okay?
Thank you, Chairman, Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Landon Farrig, Legislative Liaison for MEA. This bill accomplishes three things. It adds building, transportation, and transportation sector electrification to the allowable uses of the Strategic Energy Fund. It expands the use of Tier 1 alternative compliance payments to include households with low to moderate income and clarifies the definition of that term. And it streamlines reporting requirements while better aligning those requirements with state goals. The inclusion of electrification is, stated quite simply, the state is moving to electrification. Through the CSNA in 2022, the General Assembly communicated its intent to move the state towards electrification in both transportation and buildings. Permitting CEF to be used for transportation and building electrification will align CEF with these state goals. As for low to moderate income households, expanding the permissible uses of Tier 1 ACP to include low to moderate income or LMI households is part of leaving no Marylander behind. Though currently this ACP can be used in LMI neighborhoods, there's no relief for LMI residents who do not live in qualifying census tracts. This small change will permit MEA to reach more Marylanders who need assistance the most. At the same time, MEA is seeking to clarify the definition of LMI within the Strategic Energy Investment Fund statute. Currently, the definition requires MEA to utilize an average median income level to determine eligibility. The issue here is that average and median are two distinct mathematical functions. MEA would clarify instead that area median income should be used. This also serves to better allocate funding for Marylanders who need it most based on income levels for different areas of the state, because the cost of living differs greatly across the state. Regarding MEA reporting, House Bill 1273 would limit detailed accounting of amounts distributed from the fund to those in excess of $10,000. This significantly reduces the administrative burden of reproducing the report. The appendices in the most recent year were more than 170 pages in addition to a 60-page report. While this would still include the great majority of MEA's most significant grants. The bill also removes a requirement to identify persons and addresses receiving multiple grant awards. Lastly, the report is altered to require an estimate of greenhouse gas savings rather than electricity savings from programs, projects, activities, and investments. Though MEA is committed to transparency, the level of detail required in the CEF report detracts from the big picture of what the report should encompass, and switching the report to include an estimation of greenhouse gas reductions better aligns with current state goals. For these reasons, MEA is seeking a favorable report. I would, however, note that MEA is working with MCEC to address the funding issue that was not resolved in Senate Bill 960, passed just last year. We're working with them on an amendment language that would help address this issue. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Magruder.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, distinguished members of the committee. I'm Kathy Magruder, for the record, Executive Director of the Maryland Clean Energy Center, which is an instrumentality of the state. MCEC facilitates economic development in clean energy, climate mitigation, and climate adaptation with a focus on advancing innovative technologies, providing access to capital, and enabling environmental justice. Today, we are focused on the amendment offered by Chair Feldman and the Maryland Energy Administration among the various benefits associated with this legislation. The proposed amendment language provides for a transfer of funds to support our work creating new climate tech companies. This is not a new funding request. The associated funds were authorized in Senate Bill 960, which passed and was signed into law in 2024, but the funds were not transferred as the June 30, 2024 deadline. So this language is simply needed to allow the appropriation and transfer beyond that date. MCEC will use the funds to provide technical assistance and early-stage investment in Maryland-based startups, bringing cutting-edge technology to market with more efficient building materials, carbon capture, battery storage, and emissions mitigation solutions, among others. I'm happy to answer any questions, but we urge your favorable support of House Bill 1273 with the proposed amendment to correct this technical issue. Thank you.
Okay, before I go to Senator Augustine, just landed on this amendment, this transfer, because this was a bill passed last year. Just press you a little on, are you working on this amendment and this transfer? I mean, this was in a bill that passed last year that it seems like it was a bit of oversight. Could you just kind of shed a little light on what happened here?
Certainly. So in our view, the language of 960 transferred the funds from an account within Commerce. The funds were never actually transferred from MEA's Strategic Energy Investment Fund to Commerce to make that transfer available. So this language just corrects that drafting error.
Okay. Senator Augustine?
Thank you. we don't have, do we feel like we have already done all of the energy efficiency that we can do?
No, I think there's always room for greater efforts of that realm.
So would this not take away from potentially some of the energy efficiency activities that would occur?
The Tier 1 ACP, so I see what you're saying, in regards to the RGGI funds. I think electrification is the direction the state's going. We can continue to do our energy efficiency efforts, and the RGGI formula continues to dictate that a certain portion of those energy efficiency efforts will be directed towards low to moderate income households.
But you're asking for additional flexibility to do electrification in buildings and in transportation, whereas there is already a current charge that deals with efficiency. And we're struggling right now with our total load as it stands. This is a significant part of our conversations, and it seems that we've gotten away from efficiency. It feels that way. Can you address that?
Certainly. I think the goal here is to balance competing goals of the state, which would include energy efficiency as well as electrification. The problem herein lies in the current Strategic Energy Investment Fund statute, is that there's no allowance whatsoever for electrification, and we do want to be able to help shift those markets and begin helping people make the transition to electrification.
Are there no other places where there are opportunities for electrification?
As far as funding sources, the most constrained portion of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative auctions is actually the clean energy account. So we made a cognizant effort to avoid that particular pot of money, and the energy efficiency account has typically yielded greater flexibility, and I think that is the reason that we associated this electrification effort with that account.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Senator Hester.
Thank you. I was just wondering if you could connect the dots for me. When we have the other BEPS bill in front of this committee currently also, and I understand there was a work group called the Building Industry Transition Work Group, and they recommended a bunch of incentives for support of those buildings. Is that related to this bill, and if so, how?
I'm not familiar with the outcome of that particular work group. I think the director of MEA saw an opportunity here to assist with generally the state goals of electrification.
Okay. Seems like it should be joined up to me.
Okay, additional questions? Senator Washington.
This is a definitional question of area median income, which, and I agree with the removing of the average and median, because those are two different measures, so that was a mistake. But area, what area?
I believe it's published by county in the state of Maryland. And forgive me if I'm going to confuse my state agency here. I believe it's labor that publishes those. By defining area median income, we do two things as well. We align with the U.S. Housing and Urban Development definition, and also the definition that's being used for the IRA rebates, the home electrification and home energy efficiency rebates through the federal DOE.
Because you're striking out the state, and so I was just wondering if there was an area defined. So that's undefined. So if you perhaps could get back to us about where the area is, because the median changes depending on where you're looking. And the fact that you're also changing the definition, of low to moderate, those things sort of need to line up.
Certainly happy to respond to your office, Senator.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, additional questions? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on House Bill 1273. Let's move to the next bill. I believe somebody is Marjorie here from Delegate Stein's office. Okay, we'll take Delegate Stein's bill, House Bill 1162. And Marjorie, and who else do we have here? We've got Sean Maloney.
Yeah, Sean Maloney. Thank you.
I apologize, Sean.
Close
Maloney?
enough.
Okay, why don't you proceed on behalf of Marjorie, on behalf of Delegate Stein, okay?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Feldman and Vice Chair Kagan and members of the committee. For the record, I am Margie Brazel, representing Delegate Dana Stein. Maryland's current HVAC licensing requirements provide important consumer protections. They ensure that consumers receive safe, efficient, high-quality installation of one of the most expensive and necessary appliances in their homes, their heating, ventilation, and air conditioning equipment. Yet there have been dozens of consumer complaints reported annually that HVACR services from unlicensed contractors, despite current law prohibiting unlicensed contractors from selling to homeowners. This legislation would establish a requirement that HVACR equipment distributors only sell equipment to individuals who are legally authorized to install the equipment. By requiring equipment sellers to follow licensing requirements, this legislation will significantly improve compliance and will benefit Maryland consumers. There has been a lot of engagement from stakeholders since the initial bill was proposed, and based on feedback from members of the General Assembly, including members of this committee, and the HVACR License Board, this bill has been strengthened and amended to strengthen compliance by making violations a misdemeanor, consistent with existing penalties for license infractions. Based on feedback from the business community, the adopted amendments also remove annual reporting requirements, which some stakeholders feared would place a burden on small businesses. That's the version you have before you. The bill retains the exceptions in existing license requirements that allow a building owner to install equipment on their property, in addition to utility and government employees and holders of other professional licenses. This legislation also does not apply to small plug-in appliances like window air conditioners or space heaters. And it exempts construction material suppliers, such as retail hardware stores, that are not set up to verify licensing information. Finally, the bill includes a required disclosure to make sure that building owners and contractors who purchase the equipment are aware of the licensing requirements. The key outcomes of this legislation will include improved safety for homeowners, insurance compliance, because unlicensed contractors lack business insurance, which put homeowners at risk, lower energy costs and emissions, and it will promote a responsible industry. Improved license compliance will also support compliance with local permit requirements and business taxes, further promoting this industry. Thank you for your consideration of this legislation.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to our witness. You'll be on the up to 2-minute clock, okay?
Good afternoon, Chair Feldman and members of the committee. My name is Sean Maloney, and I'm the current president of the Heating and Air Conditioning Contractors of Maryland, HACC, a trade association for over 100 independent HVAC contractors, distributors, and associate members in the state. I'm also president of SM Mechanical, a family-owned full-service heating and cooling company based in Essex. HACC strongly supports HB 1162, as this legislation will help close a gap in existing law. Maryland currently has rigorous license requirements for HVAC contractors, which provide strong protections for consumers. However, unlicensed contractors may still buy HVAC equipment, which has resulted in numerous unlicensed contractors skirting the rules and installing equipment in violation of existing laws. These installations by unlicensed contractors are unsafe and inhibit Maryland's environmental goals. HB 1162 would prohibit HVAC equipment distributors from selling to unlicensed purchasers, which will improve compliance with Maryland's existing license laws. HVAC licenses require years of experience and training for good reason. Unlicensed installers lack the requisite experience to safely install gas, oil, and propane furnaces or install electric heat pumps. Improper installations will also run below peak efficiency, leading to higher energy bills and greenhouse gas emissions and expensive follow-up remedial work. The latest amended version of the bill also incorporates feedback from multiple stakeholders, including the HVAC License Board, to help reduce the administrative burden on sellers and retailers. This bill therefore strengthens consumer protections while requiring only modest data collection by equipment sellers. License data which many high-quality distributors already collect from their customers. Modern HVAC systems are highly complex, and achieving peak energy efficiency performance is an essential part of lowering monthly costs for all Marylanders. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and we respectfully urge a favorable report on this bill.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Margie from Delegate Stein's office or our witness? Seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 1162, which brings us to the final two bills of the day from Speaker Adrian Jones in the House. Welcome, Madam Speaker. We've got House Bill 1253 and House Bill 1547. You can decide which one you want to go first. Again, welcome, Madam Speaker.
Okay, 1253.
Okay, we're going to start with House Bill 1253.
First of all, good afternoon, Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the Senate Education, Energy, and Environment Committee. For the record, I'm Speaker Adrian Jones. I'm here today to testify on House Bill 1253, legislation to establish the Maryland Department of Social and Economic Mobility. This legislature has always stepped up to level the playing field in our state. We have programs that require minority and small business contracting. We support supplier diversity in state procurement. We create opportunities for veteran-owned small businesses. And we run a nationally recognized program to give those harmed by the war on drugs a fair shot in the cannabis industry. Unfortunately, right now, these programs are fractured across our state government. They are isolated in different agencies and often work independently of each other. All the while, our constituents and businesses lack a centralized hub that can connect them with resources and opportunities for historically disadvantaged communities. So today, I am proposing legislation to create one cabinet-level agency that will oversee all social equity programs in our state. This new agency will conduct a review of all state programs dedicated to social equity and streamline how they could more effectively coordinate support for businesses, outside entities, and our state government. We all agree that our government should run as efficiently as possible, and that's what this bill does. It organizes the operation of our social equity programs so they will be more efficient and accessible statewide. We know we are stronger when everyone has the same access to the same opportunities and when everyone has a seat at the table. And for that, I want to say thank you and ask for a favorable report on House Bill 1253.
Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker. Questions for Speaker Jones? Yes, Senator Washington.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and this again is a bold action, and I appreciate your thoughtfulness on this. And is this your intent here? Is I know a few years ago we began building on the having racial equity policy notes, and we've done a number of things. And so would this department also do that type of work as well? Would that fit under the equity model?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. I was very.
And by the way,
for the record,
tell us your name.
Sure. For the record, Matt Jackson, staffer to Speaker Adrian Jones. The social equity notes would still remain in the Department of Legislative Services, right. But yes, since this department would be focusing all of those efforts under one entity, the idea is also that the DLS fiscal note side of things could pull off of all of that information in one unified, from one unified source.
And Madam Speaker, I just mention it just because this isn't something brand new. This is something that has been evolving in bits and starts over the last few terms, and so this is a bringing together of all these concepts, and so we appreciate this. Thank you.
Okay, additional questions for the speaker? Seeing none, that concludes the bill here on House Bill 1253. And Madam, who else do we have here so we know who's at the table? Yourself.
Sorry, my name is Michelle Lambert. I work for Speaker Jones.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, Michelle. Okay, our final bill of the day, also from, absolutely.
I just want to clarify and also have on the record, none of the funds are being taken away from, I'd rather ask you the question.
No.
For the Community Reinvestment and Repair Fund, it's not there, it's the other fund.
no.
Yeah, I know it's out there, so I wanted to get it in here that very clearly that the funds are coming from enforcement and some other, some other funds are that way, so. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that concludes, again, the bill hearing on House Bill 1253. Going to next go to the final bill from Speaker Jones, House Bill 1547. Speaker Jones, it's all yours.
I'm going to repeat some of the things I said, like welcoming you guys. Okay. So,
Skip that part. That's all.
you don't want to hear your name? No, I'm going to do it anyway. Good afternoon, Chair Feldman.
You are my former seatmate. We were seatmates in the House
Yes,
of
we
Delegates.
were. Yes, we were.
Yeah.
Long time ago. Yep. Good afternoon, Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the Senate Education, Energy, and the Environment Committee. For the record, I'm Speaker Adrian Jones, and I'm here today to testify in support of House Bill 1547. Maryland has always been a leader in protecting and supporting victims of domestic violence. This legislation builds on our efforts by incorporating domestic violence awareness training into the licensure requirements for barbers and cosmetologists. We all know the statistics, but behind every number is a person and an individual story. And because hair salons are among the few places victims can visit alone, these stories are often told to our hairdressers and barbers. That's why this bill matters. HB 1547 ensures barbers and cosmetologists complete a 1-hour training program developed by the Maryland Department of Labor. The training will help them recognize signs of domestic violence, start conversations with compassion and care, listen in a way that builds trust, and connect clients to resources that can help them escape abuse. We know that domestic violence hinges on control and isolation. In fact, I have experienced this isolation in my own life and witnessed firsthand just how devastating domestic violence can be. No one should have to feel that way. And this legislation will continue our work to build support networks for domestic violence victims so they are never standing alone. Again, thank you, and I request again for a favorable report on House Bill 1547.
Okay, questions for the speaker? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on House Bill 1547 and completes our bill hearings for today.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Good seeing you.
For the rest of your day. Okay, folks,
To everybody I know, except for a couple
before we go to the next sort of business, okay, I just want to get a sense of how many folks have to, I know Senator Hester's got, some hearings over in the House. Who else has hearings in the House? Okay, we're back to quorum-ish problems. Okay, well, here's what we'll do next. We're going to bring Devin. We have a piece of legislation from Senator Hester. I would like at least, I'm just trying to figure out how to make this all work. We do have a voting list, but we also have I'd like Devin to put on the table a bill from Senator Hester, which is one of the 3 leadership package of bills, just to kind of walk through what's in there. And he's going to go get his material and come back. We're just going to have to figure out a little bit, again, back on quorums and voting and how many people are leaving and what times. And Senator Watson's already over in the other place, and Senator Simoneer's also, we got 2 members already over in the other chamber. I don't know. Well, they, okay, well,
ECM said they were starting